Hello, welcome to the course PH6B13E Computational Physics. The contents of today's lecture is taken from Core Python Programming by R. Nageswar Rao. We will continue to discuss topics from Module 1, Introduction to Python Programming. In the last class, we have seen how to change the sequential flow of control in Python programming using selection statements or conditional statements like if-else. Today, let's see how to achieve the same using iterative statements. Repeated execution of a set of statements based on a condition is known as iteration or loop. In Python, there are two types of loop. One is known as while loop and other is known as for loop. Let's first talk about while loop. And this is the general syntax for while loop. While condition expression followed by a colon, then inside that the set of instructions. Now just like the file, you leave a white space here to denote that these instructions are part of the loop body. So at the beginning of the loop, a particular condition is tested. If the answer is true, a set of instructions inside the loop body is executed and the value of the control variable is updated. At the end of the body, the control will go back to the beginning and the condition expression is tested again. If the answer is true, the set of instructions inside the body is executed again and the control variable is once again updated. And this will continue till the condition expression is tested false. So here everything is based on a condition check and the condition expression is written using a variable known as control variable. So typically you have one control variable. Sometimes you can have more than one control variable. And during the course of action inside the loop body, the value of the control variable is modified. Okay. So as long as the value of the control variable is such that the condition expression gives you a true result, then the loop will be executed, but there will come a point where the value of the control variable gives you a false result in the condition check. At that point, the loop will stop executing. In other words, the loop is terminated. So as long as the condition is true, the loop is executed. The moment the condition becomes false, the loop is terminated. So the body of the loop should change the value of one or more variables such that the condition expression eventually becomes false and the loop terminates. If that doesn't happen, what happens? The loop will repeat forever. In other words, you get an infinite loop. Infinite loop is practically useless for any computation. So whenever you define a condition expression, always make sure that at some point it has to yield a false result. Otherwise, this will result in an infinite looping operation. Let's look at a couple of examples for while loop operation. First one, a simple program to display numbers from 1 to 5. Okay. So you have to initialize the variable to the starting value 1. That's what I'm doing here, I equal to 1. Now I have to define the while loop using a condition expression. So my condition is I less than equal to 5, meaning as long as I is less than or equal to 5, the answer is true, the loop will be executed. Moment the value of I becomes greater than 5, the condition expression becomes false and the loop stops executing. Inside the while loop, I leave a white space so that Python knows that this is part of the while loop body. So instead that I say print I, then I need to modify the value of the variable. Okay. So here if you see, the condition expression is based on the variable I, right? So I is nothing but the control variable. So I need to modify the value of I in such a way that after some point, the value of I will result in a false result here. At that point, the loop stops. So I am going to increment the value of I by 1. So I say I equal to I plus 1. So in each iteration, the value of I increases by 1. Now let's see what happens here. So initially the value of I equal to 1 and 1 is less than 5. Answer is true. So the control will go inside the loop, print I. So 1 will be printed. Then the value of I is incremented to 2. The control will go back to the beginning of the loop. Once again, the condition check is done. 2 less than 5. This is true. So value of I, which is 2, will be printed. Once again, the value of incremented, it becomes 3. Condition expression, this is true. 3 will be printed. It will go to 4. 4 will be printed. 5 will be printed. Let's see what happens at the 5th iteration. Okay, so you get the answer print 5 here. Okay. After that, the value of I is incremented to 6. Once again, the control will go back to the beginning of the loop and it will check whether 6 is less than 5. This is false, right? So the moment you get a false here, the loop is terminated. So your output is going to be numbers 1 to 5 printed, each digit on a single line. Okay. Let's see another example. Suppose you want to write a program to calculate sum of first n natural numbers. So here you need an input which is up to what number you want to calculate the sum. Okay. So you call that as n equal to int, input, enter the number. Okay. So you are going to find the summation, right? So you can call the summation as a sum variable. I'm going to call it as tot for total. Okay. So whenever you are doing a summation, you can always initialize that to 0. Okay. Similarly, whenever you are doing a multiplication, always initialize that to 1. Okay. Now I need a control variable. I call it as I, and the first natural number is 1, so I is initialized to 1. Okay. Now I need the condition expression, so I am going to check whether I is less than or equal to n. Okay. If that is true, then the body of the loop will be executed. What is the body? I need to find the sum, so I am going to call tot equal to tot plus I. Then I need to modify the value of the control variable I equal to I plus 1. So instead of writing I equal to I plus 1, you can also write I plus equal to 1. The meaning of this is same as I equal to I plus 1. But I thought writing this way is more readable for people. So it's up to you. I prefer to use I equal to I plus 1. Okay. So this is the body, and once you complete your loop, you want to print the final value of the sum. So outside the loop, so look at the spacing here. Outside the loop, you say print the sum is tot. Okay. Now let's see what happens. Suppose n equal to 4. You want to find values of all natural numbers starting from 1 all the way to 4. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4. This is what you want to calculate. So initially, the summation is initialized to value 0, I equal to 1, and you check whether 1 is less than 4. This is true. So the control will go inside the loop. So here the total will now become, total is initially 0. 0 is going to be 0 plus 1. So total is modified to 1. Now the value of the control variable becomes I equal to I plus 1, which is 1 plus 1, which is 2. So value of I changes from 1 to 2. Once again, control will go to the beginning. Condition expression is tested. 2 less than 4. This is true. It will come here. Now total, which is now 1. So 1 plus 2, it is 3 now. So value of total is 3. So basically you have found the sum of first two numbers, 1 and 2. Once again, value of I is incremented. It becomes 3 now. 3 less than 4. This is true. And total is going to be 3 plus 3, which is 6. So basically you have found summation of numbers 1, 2, 3. 1 plus 2 plus 3, which is 6. Once again, value is incremented. In the next iteration, which is the last iteration, you get the value of total as 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4. And after the fourth iteration, when the value of I is incremented to 5, now what happens? The control will go back to the beginning and you check whether 5 is less than 4. This is false. So the loop is terminated. You come straight to the last statement, which is a print statement. So you print the value of tot. So when you print the value of tot, always the latest value is printed. Whatever is the value at the last iteration, that value will be printed here. So you get the number 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, whatever is that number, that value is 10 I guess, so that will be printed here. Let's do one more example. Find the factorial of a number. You know what is factorial, right? 3 factorial is 3 into 2 into 1. So once again you need to input the number as an integer, and here you are doing a multiplication. As I said, multiplication is always initialized to 1, so you call it as some name like fact equal to 1. Always remember the variable name cannot be a keyword, so you cannot use the name factorial here because factorial is actually a function, a mathematical function. You cannot keep that as a variable name, so I call it as fact. Then I have the control variable I equal to 1 initialized to 1. Then while I less than or equal to n, fact equal to fact into I is incremented. Finally you say print factorial is fact. So suppose n equal to 3, you can see what happens here. So I is 1, I is less than 3, this is true. So what is the value of fact? Originally fact is 1, so this is going to be 1 into 1, which is 1. In the next iteration I becomes 2, so the condition expression is true and the value is going to be 1 into 2, which is 2. So fact becomes 2. 2 is nothing but product of 1 and 2, right? In the next expression I becomes 3. Once again the test result is true and the value of fact is going to be 2 into 3, which is nothing but 1 into 2 into 3, that is 6. And at this point when you increment, this will give you a false, so your loop is terminated. So whatever is the latest value of fact, which is 1 into 2 into 3, which is nothing but 3 factorial, and that value will be printed here. So always make sure when you define the condition expression, at some point it has to become false, only then the loop will be terminated, otherwise you get an infinite loop. Now you can see in the first example what will be the output if the condition expression, instead of while I less than or equal to 5, if I say while I equal to 5, this is not relational equal, this is assignment. Okay, while I equal to 5, what will be the output? This is an assignment for you. You can do it for yourself. So that's about the while loop, and the second type of loop is known as for loop. Here the iteration is done over the elements of a sequence, and the number of iteration depends on the number of elements in the sequence. And the sequence could be anything. It could be a list, a string, a tuple, or a list created using the range function. As we have discussed earlier, range creates a list of integers. And the general syntax for loop is for name of the control variable in name of the sequence containing different values for the control variable. After that, the body of the for loop is written with a white space indentation. Okay. Let's see a couple of examples. First, I am going to create a sequence using a string. Suppose I have a string test equal to hello. Okay, so this is my sequence, right? So you know that in the case of a string, the first element is the zeroth element, zeroth indexed element. So this is zeroth element, first element, second element, third element, and fourth element. Now I need a control variable. I am going to call it as I. So my loop definition is going to be for, that is a keyword, name of the control variable, that is I, for I, then in, this is the second keyword, in, name of the sequence. Name of the sequence is test. For I in test, and colon, print I. Let's see what's going to be the output. Okay. So for I in test, in the first iteration, I will take the value of first element in the sequence. The first element is H, right? So print I, H will be printed. Control will go to the beginning of the loop. In the second iteration, I will assume the value of the second element in the sequence. Second element is E, so E will be printed. Obviously, each print statement prints in a new line. So in the next line, you get the character E. Similarly, L will be printed, the second L will be printed, and O will be printed. So based on the elements of a sequence, you are performing some action repeatedly. You can also do the same program using a range function. So here how it is done. Once again, you have the test string equal to hello, and here, as I said, the number of iterations depends on number of elements in the sequence. Now, how do you calculate the number of elements in a string? Using the len statement, right? So len test will give you number of elements, which is 5 here. So I'm going to call it as n. Now I need to create a sequence or a list which contains n number of elements. So I can do that for I in range n. So even though I write it as range n, you know that what does it mean? This is going to be range 0, n, 1. Because if you don't specify anything, the starting element is by default 0 and the step size, the default step size is always 1. So when I say range n, it's going to create a list of integers starting with element 0 all the way to n minus 1, which is 4, with a step size of 1. So your list is going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So in the first iteration, I will take the value of the first element, which is 0. In the second iteration, it takes the value of the second element, which is 1, then 2, 3, 4, etc. Now inside the loop, I say print test I. So now what happens? In the first iteration, I is 0, test 0. Basically, it will go to the 0th indexed element of the string test. And the 0th indexed element is h. So test 0 is going to be h. So h will be printed. In the second iteration, I is 1. So test 1 is going to be the first indexed element, which is E. So E will be printed, then L, L, O. So once again you get the same output. So here you are creating the sequence using the range function. In fact, this is the most common way of using the for loop, by creating a sequence with range function. Now let's compare the for loop and while loop. The two previous examples we have done using while loop. Let's do with for loop. First one, display numbers 1 to 5, and this is the while loop program. How do we do this using for loop? There are several ways you can do it. One of them is going to be, first itself you define the list. So you want numbers from 1 to 5, right? So you define a list x equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you say for I in x, print I. So what happens? In the first iteration, I takes the value of the first element, which is 1. So print I will give you answer 1. In the second iteration, I will take the value of the second element, which is 2. So 2 will be printed. Same way, all other numbers will be printed. This is one of the methods. Now, as an assignment, you can do the same program using range function. You know how to create a list like this using the range function, right? So you can do that. So what I have done in 3 steps, probably you can do in 2 steps. Okay. Same way, the factorial program, let's do using the for loop. So first line remains the same, n equal to int input, enter the number. Second, you are doing a multiplication, so always you have to initialize that to 1, so fact equal to 1. And look at the third step in the while loop. In the case of while loop, you need to initialize the control variable. But in the case of for loop, you don't have to initialize, right? Because the moment you define the sequence, by default, the initial value of the control variable is the value of the first element, right? So you don't have to explicitly initialize the control variable. So that part is skipped here. Now you know that you need to create a list which starts from value 1 and goes all the way to value n. So you can do that using the range function, range 1, n plus 1. So it creates a list with starting element 1 all the way to n plus 1 minus 1, which is n, with a step size 1. So inside the loop body, you simply say fact equal to fact into I. In the case of while loop, you have to increment the control variable. You have to modify the value of the control variable. In the case of for loop, that is not needed, because once you create a sequence, in each iteration, the value of the control variable will automatically be transferred to the next element, etc. So this is done automatically. So this part is also, the increment step is also excluded here. So simply you write print factorial equal to fact. Now you compare these two programs. In the case of while loop, you got the result with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines. But in the case of for loop, the same result is achieved using 5 lines. So if you compare these two, in this particular case, you can see that for loop is a smarter approach. So there are situations where you get the result faster using while loop, and in some cases you get a faster result using the for loop. So the choice is yours. You need to apply your mind and decide which tool you want to employ. Let's do one more simple example, multiplication table up to 10. Suppose you have a number, say 3. So I want to create a multiple table up to 10. So 1 into 3 equal to 3, 2 into 3 equal to 6, 3 into 3 equal to 9, all the way to 10 into 3 equal to 30. So you need to first input the number as an integer. Suppose I enter the number as 5. So you need to create multiple table from 1 to 10, right? So basically you need to create a list of integers all the way from 1 to 10 with a step size of 1. This is achieved using range function 1, 11. Now you can use the print statement and directly you print the multiplication table. You can use the formatted output here. Since everything is integer, you have %d. So %d multiplication symbol x, this is not x, into then %d, and sorry, there is no space here. So %d equal to %d. Then what are the variables? First one is the control variable I. Second one is the number which you have input, which is n. And the final one is the product of I and n. So this is how you write using the formatted output. If you want, you can use the normal print statement. Okay. So let's see what happens in the first iteration. Value of I equal to 1. So you get 1 into n, which is 5, equal to 5. In the second iteration, value of I equal to 2. So your statement is going to be 2 into 5 equal to 10. In the third iteration, this becomes 3 into 5 equal to 15. Finally, in the last statement, you have 10 into 5 equal to 50. So you have created a sequence of 10 elements. So you have 10 iterations. So at the end of 10th iteration, the loop is terminated. Now the question is, how do you choose between for loop and while loop? So when you use a for loop, suppose in this case, when you say range 1 to 11, you know that you are creating a list of integers with starting element 1 and ending element 11 minus 1, which is 10. So basically you are creating a list of 10 elements. In other words, the number of iteration is 10. Right? So if you know beforehand the number of iterations inside the loop, in other words, if you are doing a definite iteration, you know the number of iteration beforehand, then you can use a for loop. On the other hand, if you do not know the number of iterations beforehand, if you are doing an indefinite iteration, in that case you can use a while loop. So here basically you are checking for a particular condition and you don't know at what point the condition is going to be false. You only know that as long as the condition is true, the loop will be executed. And at some point, you don't know when that point arises, but at some point the condition becomes false. At that point, the iteration stops. So here you do not know the number of iterations beforehand. In that case, you can use a while loop. So for all definite iterations, you use for loop, and for all indefinite iterations, you use while loop. Now the question is, once you define a loop, do you have to keep repeating it till the condition expression gives you a false? Or is there a way I can jump out of a loop halfway through? The answer is yes. You can jump out of the loop halfway through using what is known as a jump statement. So in the next class, we will discuss about jump statements in looping operations. Thank you.